37th parallel on America's haunted highway, it's Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange. Welcome everybody back to another exciting episode of Pixelated Paranormal. Season 2, Episode 5, we were just discussing on our pre-recording that this is the penultimate episode for Season 2, which means it's the second to last episode, so I think we're going to go ahead with a Season 3, because I know everybody's dying for a little bit of Pixelated Paranormal in their life. And with that, we were saying that we're probably going to start doing some bonus episodes for you guys to hear. Hopefully you want to hear more, and if you don't, the good news is you're going to get to anyway. So without further ado, let me introduce my co-host for the evening, Preston. Preston, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Guys, tonight, again, we do not have parental guidance. Rob is having to sit this one out. He's not feeling too hot, so we want to wish Rob a speedy and healthy recovery. We miss you, buddy. We're thinking about you, and don't you worry, because I've got your news story covered. Before we get any farther, I want to do a bit of a disclaimer. Tonight's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be so much spooky or paranormal as it is going to be maybe just balls out crazy. We're going to be talking about some conspiracy theories. And with that, I think we should say the official disclaimer. At Pixelated Paranormal, we take this kind of stuff, serious, but we like to be lighthearted and, have fun with a lot of things, because a lot of these subjects are just cockamamie and strange. But one thing we do take very serious is death, and the death of family and loved ones. So later on, we're going to have a couple stories that we want to make sure everybody knows we're not poking fun at all these stories. We really just want to kind of give you the facts. So if it feels like we're making light of some serious matters when it comes to like murder or the death of a family member or somebody, we're not trying to make fun of that. There will be some funny stories. We may have some serious subject matter down the line. We just want to make sure everybody knows we're not making fun. We're not poking fun at anybody's family, anybody's loved ones that they lost. So just let that be known, guys. We're just kind of here to deliver some stories, let you guys know what we've read. I know I myself have come across a couple stories I'll be telling this morning. I actually found out a couple of these that sparked my imagination. I heard them on Bizarre States podcast, another fantastic podcast that is hosted by Jessica Chobot and Andrew Bowser, and they were discussing on a similar wavelength. We talked about doing an episode about conspiracy theories, and especially about famous people and the death thereof, and coincidentally on Bizarre States, they talked about a little bit this morning too, so I'm going to toss in a couple stories that I did a little research off of from their show and delved a little bit deeper into. So there's that, guys. About a minute and a half of a disclaimer. So, Preston, you got any news? You think we should jump into some news?
You jump into news. I ain't got shit when it comes to the news.
Rob's not here, like I mentioned before, but I'm gonna cover his news story because I feel, due diligence means I should probably read his story. And if Rob loves two things more than pugs and video games, it has to probably be clowns and robots. And you're asking yourself, what is Pixelated Paranormal? What's that?
Or clown robots.
Oh, robot clowns.
Or robot clowns dressed up as pugs. Killer pugs.
I like that. I like that. So, you ask yourselves, what is Pixelated Paranormal without clowns and robots? And I'm going to tell you, it's nothing. So let's jump on this story Rob wanted to deliver to you guys. So, keeping up with the theme of clowns, apparently these creepy clowns are making their way all the way into Georgia. Headline here from Channel 6 News says, girls in Georgia say that a clown chased them home and claimed to have videotaped it. In Catoosa, Georgia, reports of people dressed as clowns trying to lure and scare kids have now reached North Georgia. Two girls allege a clown tried to chase them down, and they have videotape of the suspected creepy clown. They have a Snapchat video of the creepy clown standing right outside the Sharita Maston Apartments. The clown waved and looked like he had a knife in his hand, waving that too as he then scampered off. Sharita says she was with her 11-year-old cousin when she spotted the clown at the BP station across the street, so she ran home. Quoted, I left her, and by the time we got here, we turned around, closing the door. It was standing right there with a knife, just waving it at us through the window, Sharita says. That's when they took the video through the blinds. They took a second Snapchat video for the side window as well. Quoted, it was scary, Sharita says. I was fixing to cry because I'm scared of clowns. Police say this is not the first creepy clown sighting in this area either. Police say this is not the first creepy clown sighting in the area. In fact, they say there have been a couple of times people have sighted clowns. In Fort Oglethorpe, police say they are taking the sighting seriously, but think the creepy clown may just be some kid trying to scare people. Angela Martin doesn't care if it's a kid or an adult, especially when it followed her home with her niece. She says whoever it is better be real careful they don't try to scare somebody with a gun. Quote, it's very dangerous, Angela says. It's very dangerous because I've told the police officers if it happens again, they're going to come pick me up instead of that person because they're gonna be dead. Georgia law prohibits anybody to wear a mask and scare people unless it's a holiday like Halloween. So what do you think, man? There's tons of freaking clowns everywhere.
I don't know. I don't know how to take these stories because, okay, one, like, where are we at in society where, like, dressing up as a clown is, like, the cool thing to do and to scare the shit out of people? Like, how do we know? I don't know. It's just like, I think this is like some weird clown cult. That's what it is. Either it's a really shitty Stephen King reenactment. Like, we got this serial killer, which is completely fucked in the head. That's like, I'm going to be the next Stephen King it. Or we got a bunch of, like, weirdos in a clown cult that have nothing better to do than to stand in a window with a fake knife and scare little girls.
So a cult or maybe some kind of posse.
Yeah, insane clown posse. Georgia police, be on the lookout. You're going to see a little Ford Fiesta. And inside this Ford Fiesta is going to be a posse of clowns, at least 15, because we all know that you can fit 15 clowns inside a Ford Fiesta. It is Guinness World Record proven fact.
It's documented science.
It's documented science.
Good stuff. Well, the other bit of news I have actually is going to be on a more local scale. It's not really scary, but first of all, let me take a moment to be sappy here and give a big shout out to my wife. I love horror movies. Everybody knows that. And one of my all-time favorite series has to be Phantasm. Did you ever watch Phantasm, Preston?
Nope.
The tall man in the middle sphere and the little midget zombies. Man, it's fantastic. Well, Shayla surprised me tonight and told me that she picked up a couple tickets for us. Phantasm was originally screened, I think, in 1979. The original was. And it's a cult classic, speaking of cults. And it's one of those that's kind of near and dear to my heart. It's a movie that I would watch snippets of on Cinemax late at night before I was allowed to watch horror movies, or I'd catch it on TNT Monster Vision.
Did you say Cinemax or Skinemax?
Oh, this was just plain Cinemax. It was probably around like 9:30 or 10.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, she surprised me with 2 tickets. They're doing a revival screening, remaster. They're doing like a 4K frame-by-frame restoration of this movie. I think J.J. Abrams is actually in charge of the restoration, so it's going to be pretty sweet. But yeah, she surprised me with 2 tickets to that, and I'm so freaking excited to go to that. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, shout out to my wife. Shout out to 13th Warren for hosting this. I think it's fantastic. Without any further ado, guys, we said we were going to talk about some conspiracy theories, but we both agreed that in order to get the full grasp of some of these conspiracy theories, it would be more important to first introduce something called the Mandela Effect. And if anybody doesn't know what the Mandela Effect is, first of all, you probably guessed that yes, it does have to do with Nelson Mandela. Okay, so the Mandela Effect basically is a phenomenon when you think you know something is 100% true, that an event in history happened, and you know 110% it happened the way you recall it, and the way people are actually telling you it happened has to be false. So basically the Mandela Effect was inspired by the actual phenomenon where people seem to remember that Nelson Mandela had actually died in somewhere in the 80s. He had been imprisoned off and on for part of his life, and a lot of people remember that Nelson Mandela died in the 80s while he was imprisoned. Is that how you remember it, Preston? Do you remember that's the way it happened?
Yeah, I mean, I a couple years ago when they're like everybody was upset that he died, I'm like, wait, didn't this already happen like in the 80s? Like that's how I remember growing up, going to school, like that piece of history that he died in prison. So I was just kind of like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here?
Right, that's the way I always thought it happened too. I remember like in the early 90s, I could have swore studying Nelson Mandela in school and them talking about how he died in the 80s, and that's the way I've always remembered it. But in fact, I think Nelson Mandela, when did he die? He died in like
2012, 2013.
Yeah, 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. We're going to get you the exact dates because that's what we do.
No, an interesting side note while you're looking that up, Rob was talking about the Mandela Effect, but he was talking about remembering that Stephen Hawking had died. He remembers reading an article about hearing that Stephen Hawking had died, and that's what got us started on this whole Mandela thing for this episode.
Really?
Uh-huh. It was in a text message.
Oh, that's crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so apologies, guys. Nelson Mandela died on December 5th, 2013. But like I said before, a lot of people recall him dying in the 80s.
Like 82?
They remember what?
82, 83, something like that.
Yeah, 82, 83, somewhere like that. But yeah, basically, apparently that's not true at all. So with the Mandela Effect, the other classic case that a lot of people seem to remember is the infamous Berestain bears. And okay,
Berestain, okay. Potato, tomato. It's
Berestain.
Or
but
Berenstein.
How do you spell Berenstein?
Yeah.
Du hast. How do you recall Berestain bears being spelled?
I don't Barastine. I don't know.
That's the worst I've ever freaking heard it. Okay,
Man,
so
I read the books as a kid. I just remember it being Berenstein bears, and you fucks are saying Berestain.
So, okay, the argument then would be, is it Berenstein, or what'd you say, Berenstein?
Stein.
So, okay, that's the classic argument. I always remember it being called the Berestain Bears. And that's the way a lot of people remember it. The Berestain Bears. But I distinctly remember it being spelled Stein. No, sorry. Bern. Stein. So you would pronounce it the Berenstein, but I always called it the Berenstain Bears. So it's just kind of...
Berenstein, see?
Yeah, that's true, the Berenstein. So that's the classic argument. So a lot of people in our generation, I don't know why I said my generation, our generation remember it being called the Berenstain, but spelled Stein. And apparently there's a huge discrepancy and argument that everybody's going through all their books remembering it being spelled Stein, and we're discovering it's all spelled Berenstain, Stain. So with these two ideas, with the Mandela Effect being that he either died in the 80s or in the year 2013 a second time, Berenstain Bears being spelled Stein versus Stain, it brings up the idea that maybe we might be suffering from a dimension slip. So if you imagine two Earths side by side, you've got the Berenstain and you got the Berenstein Earth, and somehow these two kind of collided or brushed past each other, and all of a sudden the history that we grew up with, Nelson Mandela being dying in the 80s and Berenstein Bears, somehow or another, history books and history had been changed to Berenstain and Mr. Mandela living to a ripe old age of, oh man, how old was he? Like late 80s? Yeah. Dying in the year 2013. So I'm going to give you some more examples here of Mandela Effect real quick. And guys, I'm sorry, we're kind of just winging this episode. I actually had a lot of coffee earlier. I went to Starbucks and I thought, man,
shots of espresso in your coffee, you fucking meth head.
Yeah. I tell you what, my head's in outer space right now. So I pull up and I'm thinking, you know what, guys? guys, like I thought about everybody when I was ordering. You know what, guys? It's fall, y'all, and I really want a pumpkin coffee. So I pulled up and ordered a venti, the big O one, and I said, I need to get a iced pumpkin latte because that's how I roll. And she says, well, you can get a venti, or actually the grandes are on sale for $3. And I said, oh, cool, just give me one of those. And she's like, do you want an extra shot? Because an extra shot could be free too. And I was like, sure. Give me 2 of those then. Give me 2 grande pumpkin spice lattes iced with extra shots, please. Because that sounded like a fantastic idea. And currently, I think my brain is somewhere in orbit. So let's get back to the subject matter while there's still a chance. So you've got the Mandela Effect. Berenstein. Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s or 2013s. So
Stephen Hawking dying or Stephen Hawking still being alive?
Stephen Hawking dying or being alive, right. Because you know what? I'm going to be honest. I could have swore that Hawking's died as well. But you know what? I think Rob may be thinking of Christopher Reeves. Yeah, I'm not trying to be too funny, but I mean, they are two very influential people in history who both happen to be in wheelchairs, unfortunately. So, now here's one that I argue with specifically. Some people say they remember Hurricane Katrina hitting New Orleans in April of 2005 rather than August of 2005. I specifically remember it being later in the year in August, and I'm going to tell you why. I think it was a trip that we had taken to Florida, I think with my parents, actually. My wife and my parents and I went to Florida, and the day we left, it started pouring down rain, and I believe that was the beginning of the actual hurricane hitting, because I remember, after about a month after we left, which would have been right around probably May, the end of May, early June, I think, the rain started hitting pretty hard, and then the hurricane hit. So, another one here, some people recall that the Columbine massacre happened in 1996 and 1999 instead of 1999. What do you think? Do you remember that happening?
1999?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, I remember too, because I was in middle school in 1999 in 8th grade. So 1996, I think, would have meant I would have been in grade school still, maybe 5th grade. Mm-hmm. And I remember right around 7th or 8th grade, Columbine massacre happened, and you had the trench coat mafia and all that kind of stuff, and there were scares, all around middle schools and high schools throughout the U.S., but I remember we had one in El Dorado called the PK, which meant prep killers, and they were rumored to be doing another similar horrific event. Never happened, thank goodness. Nothing ever came of it. But okay, in Tiananmen Square, the infamous, or famous rather, Tank Man photo. Do you remember if he got ran over by the tank, or did the tank stop and not run him over?
I have no recollection whatsoever of what you're talking about.
Me neither. But a lot of people argue that the Tank Man got ran over instead, but a lot of people didn't think he got ran over. Some people have vivid memories of him being crushed by the tank. Let's see here. Some people remember Patrick Swayze making a full recovery from cancer instead of dying in 2009.
No, he died.
Right, he died. But here's what's weird. I could have swore I remember when Breaking Bad came out, I could have swore Patrick Swayze played Walter White.
Really?
I could have swore I remember seeing a promo for that show where Patrick Swayze was the guy wearing the fedora and the jacket, the teacher jacket. So I specifically remember that. Now, here's one that I think is kind of interesting. Some people swear that Muhammad Ali died, although he's still with us. Keep in mind, the article I'm looking at examples from was 2014, so maybe that further stretches that, because, Ali unfortunately did die. When was that, back in January? Mm-hmm. January of 16. So, that one kind of comes full circle. He is officially deceased now, unfortunately. Some people believe that Neil Armstrong died a year before he actually did die in 2013. And that when he died in 2012, he made a reference to somebody named Mr. Gorski while on his voyage to the moon. Now, I've never heard anything about Mr. Gorski, so maybe that's something we should look up in the future.
We should, because I haven't heard anything about that either.
Right. Some people remember Henry Winkler died. The old Fonz died during the filming of Happy Days, though he's still alive and well and doing plenty of movies. So, that one there we know is not true. There are some other things in here that I read saying that at least a couple people believe that the color chartreuse is more of a maroon color instead of a bright yellow-green?
For the record, I'm colorblind, so I don't know either way who's right or who's wrong.
Right. Some people insist that the show Ghost Hunters is actually called Taps. I think that one is kind of a dumb example. Some people believe there's another timeline that we've lived where Katy Perry was also known as Kate Perry. Now, guys, I want you to take Katy Perry and tuck her in your pocket for a minute, because little does Preston know, we're going to come back to her shortly and discuss that. But I've got another one here. I've got another example, and I think it might very well just blow your sensitive little brain right out.
But the listeners are mine.
Maybe everybody.
Okay.
Maybe everybody. So brace yourself, guys. I hope you're sitting down, because this one actually kind of messed with me a little bit. Okay, Henry VIII, right?
Yeah.
Henry VIII,
Henry
I
am.
Okay, he's got that famous portrait, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's got his fancy hat and his little fancy lad tights on. And what is he holding in his hand?
A scepter.
Okay, but what kind of poultry is he holding in his hand? What is he eating in that famous portrait? What is he eating?
A Cornish hen.
Well, not exactly, and this isn't really a trick question. Everybody recalls, including myself, he's holding a drumstick in his hand. Does that ring any bells to you?
Nope.
Do you feel like in that famous portrait you remember him holding a turkey drumstick?
No, he should have like a scepter or like a scroll or like something kingly in his hand, not a fucking turkey drumstick.
I'm one of the many people that remember him specifically holding a turkey drumstick in his hand.
Is there like a parody, like a comedy parody somewhere, and like
okay,
what's the guy that made Young Frankenstein and Spaceballs?
Okay, right. So that's really good. This is really great. Hold on to that for just a second. Let me read you this real quick. Many people will recall a painted portrait of Henry VIII holding a turkey leg in one of his hands. It's among many of this writer's memories too. It's a classic painting, Henry VIII in Holbein style. And Henry is enjoying himself a hearty meal. I recall, says the writer, something that looked a lot like a turkey leg in one hand, although he believes it's his left hand, not the right. It would be on the right side of the canvas, but he may be wrong. I also recall a large goblet in front of him. I assumed it was to show that God had blessed the monarch with good health and comfortable lifestyle. A lot of times in these portraits, even if it was true or not, a lot of the artists would include symbolic objects, crowns and that kind of thing. Now, he says, apparently the turkey leg portrait doesn't exist. It never did. Not in any timeline that we're in currently. That's odd, though, because a lot of people remember it. So you're saying you don't have any recollection of this guy eating a turkey leg?
Nope.
At all?
No.
So the argument is that a lot of people say, in that time, when the portrait was painted, turkeys would not have been in England anywhere near Henry VIII. They would have technically been still native to the U.S. Mm-hmm. But the argument is not true. During the time of Henry VIII, guinea fowl were a delicacy in England. They were generally imported through Turkey. Coincidence. And they were sometimes called turkey fowl or shortened to just turkeys. However, if you look at the photo of a guinea fowl, they look like partridges. They're very tiny. So it would have looked like the guy was holding like a hot wing compared to the drumstick that I am 120% sure this guy freaking had. So the problem is nobody can find any such photo of the turkey leg portrait anywhere near, although it seems to be a clear memory. The turkey leg reference is popular whether or not the painting exists. For example, in the 15th season of The Simpsons, the Magical History Tour... Wow. Magical History Tour?
Ooh.
Is that a synchronicity for what's to come? The episode closes with a reference to Henry VIII holding a world turkey leg eating record. So that's even weirder. Why would he be in a painting and in The Simpsons? Who knows? Some people point out that Charles Lofton portrayed Henry VIII in a movie. Now, I don't remember this movie, but you say you do, and there's a clip of the movie here. The writer here says he's never seen it, but he's posted a clip below. If you don't see the flash, it's also at Turner Classic Movies. And it's a guy posing whatever movie this was, and he's eating a big chicken or turkey leg. Some people, it says, seem to think that the issue comes from the dining scene in which the actor, Charles Lofton, devours a chicken with considerable zeal. Maybe that's not true for some. Maybe it is true for some from memory. But he says, even if I'd seen the movies as a small child and later forgot, I would recall it was in color, even though this movie is black and white. So there was a movie where he eats the chicken leg or the turkey leg, which maybe gave us some kind of false memory as far as him holding a chicken leg. But I'm 95% sure I've seen the freaking portrait in art history, and he's got a big damn turkey leg in his hand.
Well, we took the same art history classes, buddy, and
yeah,
I don't remember that.
Says you. So here's something that I think may solve the argument, even though I have no real proof of it. I kind of remember like a commercial for somebody. I don't know if it was like a TV show or a restaurant. And do you remember back when Quiznos had those monkey rats? They used to sing, "Eat Quiznos subs!"
No, what the fuck are you talking about?
I think the same artist, this is real, by the way, Google it. You will not be right in this argument. The same artist that did the Float On music video for Modest Mouse, I believe, is the same one who did this commercial. I want to say there was some kind of commercial where it was like a stop motion animation of this portrait, and he's holding a giant turkey leg and takes a giant bite out of the turkey leg. So maybe that's going to be the nail in the coffin for my argument that I'm right and you're wrong. But there you go, guys. Mandela Effect, saying that we actually are the victims of some kind of dimensional shift to where two dimensions are overlapping on top of each other. So with that in mind, guys, we're going to jump into some conspiracies. And again,
no.
Oh, you got something?
Because I have a personal story.
Oh, cool. Yeah, perfect. Let's do it.
So when I was like 2 or 3, Mom and Dad had bought me this cartoon, and it was like one of those that looked like it came from like maybe like the 70s, like the style of it.
Maybe like an old Chuck Jones cartoon, maybe?
Yeah, it wasn't like too detailed or whatever. You know, the kind of like there's those books that you can buy at Barnes & Noble, like how to draw like cartoons, and like the characters are called like Keyhole Kin because it's very just kind of line work. Like very simple,
sure, yeah.
Very simple lines. And it was a cowboy and an Indian, like classic cowboy Indian story. And I used to watch the shit out of it. Like, this was the bee's fucking knees for me when I was like 2 or 3. And one of the scenes, and I remember it clearly, one of the scenes toward the end of the video or the movie was that this, like on a highway. Well, what's the technical term for it? Like when it looks like a butterfly, like butterfly wings, like 2 series of 8s, like when a highway, you go up one side and it curves around. There's a technical term for that when you're in big cities and you have like the off and on ramps on the highway. A what? A
cloverleaf?
Yeah, something like that. So anyways, all of a sudden this Wild West world, this like cloverleaf highway shows up, and there's like all these Indians running around it. And so for my 3rd birthday, Mom and Dad got me like a themed birthday party that had all the toys. Like I got the big vinyl action figure of this cowboy, and like I had they went to Ed's IGA or the Apple IGA in Augusta, and got the cake made with this character on it. And there were some photos of me holding up the cake. And I remember later on in life, like, man, you know how like you watch all these shows when you're kids and you're like, you hope they hold up. Like, you just want to go back for old time's sake and watch this and be like, oh man, this is so fucking amazing. This is better than what I remember it. I cannot find any fucking existence of the show ever being, ever. Like, it doesn't exist. And so I've Google searched cartoons from the 80s, cartoons from the 70s, cowboy cartoons from the 60s, and I've gone through list after list after list, and none of them are what I remember, and they don't match up to the photos I have of me with my little cowboy cake.
That's weird, man. That's really bizarre.
This cartoon existed. I swear to God, I had the photo of me in this little cowboy hat, but in real life, like right now in this timeline, that cartoon never existed. And that is my own personal Mandela story.
Well, okay, so look, in your defense, there are so many, like, weird bootleg, off-the-wall, no rights belonging to anybody cartoons from back in then, those days, like the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
But it was so popular enough that they actually had action figures, like actual toys. Like mom and dad got me the action figures, and there's pictures of me like opening up like this fucking and holding up the cowboy doll.
Okay, so
like,
do you have a photo of that?
Yeah.
Well, we got to jump on and post that to a couple forums and find out exactly what it was.
Yeah.
If you've got the photos, then we can debunk this right now. We're gonna solve this puppy. So
we're gonna do it.
I don't ever recall specifically, other than the classic Mandela dying kind of thing. I don't remember anything else really in my life that's ever been like a Mandela Effect. So I don't know. That's weird. But yeah, we're gonna get to the bottom of that, Preston. We're gonna find out what cartoon that was. By God.
Just so that me and Blake can have daddy-son moment and watch it together and relive all my glorious memories.
Well, your parents don't have the video anymore?
No, it was fucking VHS, man.
Right, but they don't have that anymore?
No, I watched the fucking thing so much I wore it out.
Ah, see, that sounds a little bit too convenient to me, Preston.
Just like all my copies of Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom and Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
I don't have those anymore because I watched them so fucking much that they're gone.
They're gone. Well, okay, so earlier we mentioned the Beatles, and is it an appropriate time now, Preston, for us to introduce your Beatles conspiracy?
Yeah.
Cool.
So, sticking with the Mandela Effect and alternate universe, so the first one that I'm going to talk about is going to be almost like an alternate universe scenario. So this website, thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com, real website, you can go to it. And when you click on it, the main menu has home, the story, and pictures. And down at the very bottom, there's a little download button that says the entire album. Now, the album is called Everyday Chemistry, and it consists of 11 songs. The first song is called Four Guys, Talking to Myself, Anybody Else, Sick to Death, Gene, I'm Just Sitting Here, Soldier Boy, Over the Ocean, Days Like These, Saturday Night, and Mr. Gator's Swamp. That sounds like classic 80s Beatles.
80s Beatles, you idiot?
Huh?
80s Beatles?
Yeah, 80s Beatles, okay?
The fuck? 80s Beatles? What are you talking about?
Hold on, we're going to get there. So I clicked on this part of the story. So I went to the website, I clicked on the story, and this is what I'm going to read to you right now.
Oh, shit. Is this the story?
This is the story.
Okay, go ahead.
You ready?
Yeah, do it.
The following is an actual account of my experience as of recently. Because of the nature of what has happened, I must remain anonymous until I feel it is safe to reveal my name.
Never.
But for
Never.
now, you can refer to me as James Richards. On September 9th, 2009, I experienced something that I'm still having trouble believing happened to me. I came into the possession of a cassette tape containing a Beatles album that was never released. In fact, not only was it never released, but it was recorded many years after they broke up. And no, I'm not talking about Clotal. I don't know what that is, so...
I'll Goog it.
Any listeners know, fill us in later. Now, this is where the story becomes slightly more unbelievable, and it is almost embarrassing to attempt to explain the incident to you for fear of viewing me as completely absurd. But I must assure you, I'm not insane or on drugs, and hopefully the audio from this tape, which you can download, will be proof enough that there is more than we think is out there. I live in Livermore, California, but on September 9th, I was driving home from Turlock after visiting a friend for a few days. I had my dog with me and didn't have any plans for the day, so I decided to take a drive through a place called the Del Puerto Canyon, just west of Turlock. There is a scenic road that is fun to drive and actually goes through Livermore. I hadn't taken a cruise through it in a while, so I thought, what the hell, let's take this way home, and it was around 2 p.m. A ways into the canyon, my dog started acting like she needed to use the restroom, so I pulled over to the first available parking area and let her out. She saw a rabbit and started chasing it. Now, my dog is pretty good, but if she is chasing something, there is no stopping her whatsoever, so the only thing I could do was become part of the chase. There had already been about a 40-yard head start, so I had to really book it. The uneven ground and soft dirt made it difficult to run, and it wasn't very far into the chase that I stepped into a rabbit hole, Alice in Wonderland, and fell and knocked myself unconscious. When I woke up, I was in a room with some furniture and electronics, and It looked like I had been taken care of because bandages were wrapped around my head, but I still felt uneasy about the situation because where I fell and hit my head was in a very rural, unpopulated area with no houses, and outside the window of the room I could see and hear traffic. I wasn't near the window in the room. It was actually on the other side, next to the unusual-looking electronic machine that I didn't recognize from anywhere that I've seen before.
Tape player.
The only reason this stood out was because it seemed out of place in the person's home, which most of the room resembled a normal house. I decided to get up and look out the window, but the door opened and in ran my dog, who was pretty excited to see me. When I looked up, there was a man standing in the door. He was about 6 feet tall, had medium long black hair, and dressed casually nice, and gave me a greasy vibe.
And he then said, "Boy, I'm about to butter your biscuits."
He introduced himself as Jonas and asked me if I was okay, which I said yes. He said he found me unconscious in a field with my dog barking at me, so I thanked him for helping me and my dog out. And then I was surprised that my dog came back to me. I then asked him the question that would make me start wondering if in fact I had gone crazy. I asked him, "Where am I?" "About 20 feet away from where I found you," he replied. I told him that couldn't be possible because there were no houses within at least 20 miles of where I last remember being. He told me that what he was going to say next would be very shocking and unbelievable, and if he didn't actually experience it himself, that he wouldn't believe it. He took a long look at the machine near the window and looked back at me and said he transported me to a parallel Earth. He said he traveled to our Earth dimension and found me knocked out in the blazing heat and nobody around to help me. Normally, he said he doesn't like to take outsiders through a portal, but in my case, he made an exception. I immediately started asking questions about traveling to parallel worlds, and since all I knew about the topic was YouTube videos of Machio Kaku, he told me to slow down and that he would explain himself. Apparently, in his world, a parallel travel machine can be purchased quite easily. While not cheap, it's still fairly popular. The machine is dangerous and can cause death. In the 50s of his dimension, the government was faced with the decision to continue to fund a space program, or a parallel dimension program called ARP-D. I'm pretty sure the PD is parallel dimension, but I can't really remember for sure. He explained that the real danger of using one of these machines was exploring new dimensions, and since there was an infinite amount of Earths in our dimension, only a small amount have been explored. The problem with exploring unknown dimensions is the chance that you will die somehow once you walk through the portal doorway. He told me that people die from falling if the ground isn't close enough, or die from drowning if, in that case, in the parallel dimension, there's a river instead of ground. Some people die from fire, while others die from atmospheric issues. He said that older people avoid this as they would have to know that there would be a similar ground in the dimension that they were traveling. Many of these worlds were lush vegetation worlds that were never ruined by man, only to be invaded by the large, overcrowded population of the travelers. We talked about a lot of things. It was interesting to see what similarities and differences we'd have between the worlds. So Jonas had me follow him into another room that had a bookshelf-looking thing with some cassette tapes. Yes, the music ones. Apparently CDs never caught on in his world. And a tape player/radio record player. Though it didn't quite look like the type of radio we have here. The speakers looked more like crinkled cardboards, but sounded really great. I didn't get a good look at the speakers, but they certainly weren't round. They almost looked like tall accordions. The only Beatles albums he had that was store-bought had the real cover art was Sgt. Pepper's. The covers looked slightly different than the ones that we have, but the songs were all the same. The other 6 Beatles tapes he had were all like somebody recorded them onto a blank cassette from him, and he wrote the song titles on the card slipped in the case, which is where we get the one that he has. And then it goes on, there's like another whole page of this, and I'm not going to read all of it.
Thank God.
But basically, he brought back this Beatles tape that was recorded in the 80s called Everyday Chemistry, and you can download it, listen to it, and form your own opinion.
So, guys, apparently Skype this evening is being an unruly mistress. So, just in case we lost what Preston just spent 4 days reading to us, Preston, give us the quick abridged version of what happened. Start from the top. Guy's walking his dog.
So basically, this guy we're gonna call James Richard was coming back from a 2-day vacation, visiting some friends in California. He was driving through the desert, and his dog had to take a piss, and he lets the dog out. The dog sees a rabbit. He fucking hightails, chases this dog, because he's like, come back. Runs into a rabbit hole, cracks his head. When he wakes up, he's in this house that he doesn't recognize. He sees this weird cassette player. He's like, what the fuck's going on? This guy called Jonas walks into the room and says, hey, I'm from a parallel dimension, and I brought you here, and in our dimension, traveling is very easy and affordable, and almost everybody has a machine that can do it. Blah, 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 yakety schmackety. He looks over at this bookshelf, sees a cassette tape for this Beatles album called Everyday Chemistry, which was recorded in the 80s, brought it back with him, and put it up so that you could hear it where the Beatles were still all alive and never broke up.
Bam!
Bam!
So this guy, who refuses to give his name online,
yes,
he wants to be enigmatic and go by James Richardson, so maybe it's safe to bet that his name is Richard Jameson, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Claims that he took his dog for a piss, slipped down, hit his head, Bob's your uncle. He's woken up by Jonas in an alternate reality. Yeah. Where CDs aren't popular anymore. Sounds like a hipster. Yep. And then he claims to have...
CDs never caught on, so everybody still uses cassettes.
Cassettes. CDs never caught on, but time-traveling machines did.
Yep.
And this old guy says, by the way, before I send you back to your reality... No, he stole it, didn't he? He stole it.
He just is like, here, I'm going to take this. He's like, okay.
See, the story I remember was that he stole the tape. He grabbed the tape and stuck it in his pocket, and then he popped back into this world. But regardless of how that works, you can go to this guy's website now, apparently, and listen to the songs. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. It's called the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com. Again, the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com.
And we're not being sponsored by them, by the way. Now, I listened to a couple of these songs, and I will be the first to admit I'm not the world's biggest Beatles fan. It sounds kind of... they sound okay, but they almost sound like somebody spent a lot of time just hacking up a bunch of Beatles tracks to make their own kind of amalgam of what they think is a really great product.
Yeah.
Okay, so that explains your little thing earlier about 1980s Beatles music.
Yeah.
So guys, jump on that website, the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com, and listen to some of those tracks, because... you can make your own decision there. You can actually download the entire album in a zip form that's about 70 megabytes. So,
Mr. Gator Swamp Jamboree. That has to be a keeper right there. Like, I felt like if we had that song in this reality, work never would have happened.
Are you talking about the Rihanna song?
Yes.
God.
Because that's what this reality needed, was a little more Beatles.
A little more Beatles, a little less Rihanna. A little more talk, a little less conversation.
There you go.
Okay, so you asked a second ago what the hell Klaatu was.
Yeah.
Well, bud, don't you fear. I've got the answer. And I'm going to try to skim through this and give you guys the abridged too, because I don't want to take another 45 minutes reading another story. In September of
quite 45 minutes, goddammit.
In September of 1976, Capitol Records released a mystery album and let the secret carry itself through the word of mouth throughout North America. This initially obscure record oozed of secrecy and inspired vast speculation by everyone in the industry, fans and professionals alike. So what was so mysterious, Preston? The album hit the scene, and as many people got their hands on it, they were left scratching their heads. There were no pictures of the band. There were no writing credits given to the musicians. There was no biographical info, no notes, no thank yous, no nothing. There was only one piece of information revealed: the cover art. It looks a lot like that. What's that band you went and saw that had that awesome monkey and spaceman poster?
Oh, you're talking about the Claypool Lennon Delirium.
Yeah, there's a sun that kind of looks like that artwork. But the band's name was Klaatu, Klaatu. Or was the album's name Klaatu? The band's name Klaatu? What gives? Cue the media frenzy. Setting the stage 6 years before all the hearts were broken when the announcement came that the Beatles had disbanded, in years to come, nothing was dreamed of more in the industry and in the global pop culture than the reunion of the Beatles, the famous Fab Four. Various newspapers and magazines in the US and in Canada had been given this Klaatu album killer reviews. It stated in some of the reviews, the album showcases masterful Beach Boy style vocals, along with many orchestration and styles of the Beatles. The positive reception was with your standard positive reviews. However, the game was on when Stephen Smith, album reviewer for the Providence Journal of Rhode Island, wrapped up his article with a key piece of specific speculative excitement. Klaatu could very well be an anonymous reunion album of the Beatles. Minds are blown. And all it took...
Barata. Nicaragua.
That's what I thought. Okay, so it says all it took was Smith to fan the flame. But he didn't fan the flame. He poured in a full drum of gasoline and tossed in a grenade. The snowball picks up speed. The situation explodes into a full-on Stage 5 viral pandemic. The story didn't just gain traction. The concept of fiction and breaks were thrown out the window. Everyone on the planet is trying to crack the case. You've got a lot of people watching and rewatching The Day the Earth Stood Still looking for clues. Why? Because the alien's name was Klaatu. So I don't want to fucking bore everybody with reading through this. But yeah, apparently there might be an album called Klaatu that could be a Beatles reunion, I guess. I don't know. You never heard of it. I wonder if your brother knows about it.
Probably.
Probably. Okay, so here we go, guys. We're going to leave that open, and you can solve that mystery on your own, because I really don't want to fucking read the rest of that. Okay, cool. So we've got that. Now, let's keep on shifting gears and go into more Beatles conspiracies. What else you got for me?
Brace yourself.
Braced.
Paul McCartney
Uh-oh.
never wrote, "Maybe I'm amazed." He never formed the band Wings. He never got into it with the Yoko Ono. Never became a vegetarian. Never got knighted by the Queen.
Bum, bum, bum.
And do you know why? Because he secretly died in 1966 while doing the very Englishman thing by picking up a hitchhiker. She was so excited that she was in the car with Paul McCartney that she was like, "Oh my God, it's Paul!" Was hugging him, and he lost control, flipped the car over several times, crashed violently, exploded flames, and decapitated himself.
Oof.
And the decapitated head was like so deformed and couldn't get good, dental records from it. They were like, "Crap, what do we do? What do we do?" And so they faked Paul McCartney's death, or rather his not death, and found a guy called Billy Shears, and he became the new Paul McCartney.
Yeah, this happened, what was it? Like, this is where the conspiracy gets funny, because I remember reading about this, like in I read about it supposedly happening in like 1966, right?
Yes, 1966. But now, it didn't hit America until like 67 when a guy called in on a radio show and started talking about it. And then that's when the shit hit the fan.
Right. A radio show on WKNR-FM.
Yes.
Okay, that's the one.
With Uncle Cletus.
Uncle Cletus. No, it's actually with Russell Gibb.
Yep.
Satin-voiced, smooth-talking Russell Gibb.
Now, what clues did they leave us? I know you're asking that question. Okay,
I am asking right now. I'm going to bet you a nickel it has to do with Abbey Road, because why wouldn't it?
Well, it does, but there are other clues.
Okay.
There are other clues.
Go for it. I'm not going to interrupt you anymore with any jokes.
In the song Taxman...
Maybe one-liners, but no jokes.
Okay. In the song Taxman, George Harrison sang the lyric, "Advice for those who die," meaning Paul.
Uh-huh.
The entire Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album was awash with Paul is Dead clues. The Beatles had formed a new band. A fictional member named Billy Shears supposedly was the name of the actual Paul's replacement. The album contained John Lennon's A Day in the Life, which had the lyrics, "He blew his mind out in a car," and recorded the phrase, "Paul is dead. Miss him. Miss him." Which became evident only when the song is played backwards. Lennon also mumbled, "I buried Paul" at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever. But in an interview, Lennon said, No, I really mumbled cranberry sauce. Now, if you use the Sgt. Pepper album's cover, okay, if you take the cover of Sgt. Pepper, where it says Lonely Hearts Club Band on the drum, and you put it in a mirror, the part of the logo reads 1X He Die 1, which is supposed to be code for that he died September 11th, 1966. Okay, so we have that, but only if you put it in a mirror, so it's like, backwards code.
Okay, gotcha.
And then on Abbey Road, if we look at the character placement on Abbey Road, we have John, George, Ringo, who pretended to cross the street as a funeral procession. John wore all the white, like a clergyman. Ringo was the mourner, dressed in black. And George donned jeans like a gravedigger. Paul, he wore no shoes. He didn't need them because, boom, he was dead.
Now, I heard a similar theory, but I don't know my freaking Beatles. You got Lennon in front in white.
Yep.
And then you've got Ringo next.
Yep.
And the theory I heard is that you've got Lennon in white, white linens. Okay, there we go. And then Ringo is dressed in black like a mortician, is what I had always heard. He was a mortician. And then who's the old boy in the back, the one that nobody remembers?
George.
Dun, dun, dun. He's dressed like a gravedigger. And then, of course, you've got McCartney not wearing shoes because he doesn't need shoes to go to heaven, and also symbolic of Jesus. Okay, go ahead.
Now here's the other alternate theory, is that Paul never died. He's all good and well. But Ringo was the chap that died.
Oh.
And they use all the same theories for Paul for Ringo. And in the forefront of that, if you look on Sgt. Pepper, where you have all the different mock-ups of the Beatles, and the 1960 Beatles, all of the Beatles, except for Ringo, are in the classic black suit, white shirt, black tie. Ringo is in a sweater, and that's because Ringo died, and he's sad. And that's it. So, basically, there used to be a book about, did Paul die, did Ringo die, find the truth. But it was so absurd and shitty that people gave up on the whole Ringo is dead theory, and they're still believed to this day that Paul McCartney is actually Billy Shears, a.k.a. William Campbell.
Now, see, I'd heard about some of this stuff a long time ago with, what's his name, Billy Shear? What turned me onto this idea is that the conspiracy I heard is that the Beatles were a band and they all had died, or most of them had died, and so the government, whether it be the U.S. or the British, made up a bunch of Beatles bands to kind of keep the momentum going, because at that current time, both governments really needed that positive vibe, and the Beatles were just kind of like making everybody's life a little bit better. And ideally, these all kind of circle around Paul McCartney. And you can look at photos, and look at the photos sometime. His teeth seem to change over the years, sometimes even like overnight. You can find a photo of them like getting on a plane, and he has this kind of, gaps in his teeth. His teeth are very flat. And then you can see a photo from like a week later where there's no gaps in his teeth, but his two front teeth are a little bit longer than they're supposed to be. There's other photos of like more gaps, less gaps, a photo on Friday of a bowl cut, a photo on, the next Monday with like long hair or longer hair. And the idea is that there's a bunch of like look-alike imposter bands going around touring because the actual four had perished. So interesting stuff. And some of the cover art, they always say that the Beatles always left clues in the cover art. In 63, on the front cover of With the Beatles, Ringo's face is not in line with those of the other Fab Four. Clearly a clue. Ringo on this album is a different Ringo from the others. Obviously, he had died between the first two albums. 1964, on the cover of A Hard Day's Night, George is the only Beatle with his back to the camera in any of the photos, and he's the only one holding a cigarette, a quote-unquote coffin nail. These are signals that now George has died. 1966, on Revolver, John number 2 sings the song I'm Only Sleeping. Sleep is, of course, a metaphor for death. In 1967, I think you covered Strawberry Fields, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, that's always kind of interesting. Somebody else talks about, you said he picked up a hitchhiker, right?
Yeah, Paul McCartney was, driving somewhere and picked up a hitchhiker, and she freaked the fuck out and caused a wreck, and that's how he died.
See, I had read something, too, that they had to do something with a woman in blue that caused his death. Was she wearing a blue dress?
No.
Okay, well, somebody talks about how she had a blue dress on, and if you look at the cover art of Abbey Road, there's a woman walking by in a blue dress, but she's blurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, kind of fascinating, kind of just, who gives a fart?
It was kind of funny because everybody cared about Paul, but nobody gave a shit about Ringo. Like, Ringo dead. No, nobody cared.
Yeah. That's kind of true, though. Like, Ringo's still alive and kicking and touring, but people care. I'm not going to say people don't care, because people do. I've got a good buddy of mine who was on cloud 9 because he was actually going to be in Wichita. Was he in Wichita, or was it like at a casino?
He was. He performed at our Hartman Arena, which is like this little crappy arena where they do indoor football.
Uh-huh.
Tickets were like $60. Jason and I were gonna go, but then Les Claypool and Shawn Lennon, they came to Kansas City the same night. We're like, fuck it, we're gonna go see that because that's gonna be a stellar show compared to Octopus's Garden in the Sea.
I'm not sure what that means, but.
You know, he's the one that wrote the song, I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade.
What would you do if I said I'd never heard that?
Well, you deserve a fucking gold star because that is probably one of the worst songs ever written in history.
Now, I had read another conspiracy about Paul dying. Paul is not dead hoax, it says here. The most common tale is that on Wednesday, the 9th of November in 1966, 5 a.m., McCartney, while working on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, stormed out of the recording session after an argument with one of the other members of the group, which we know they had been arguing, and rode off in his Austin Healey, which he subsequently crashed. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. The story was largely pieced together by fans from the lyrics of several songs. The most common narrative includes the following pieces of evidence. Quote, he didn't notice that the lights had changed because he was busy watching the pretty girl on the pavement. Which supposedly may have been the meter maid of Lovely Rita. After narrowly missing her dressed in blue, she is said to have been a blur on the back of the Abbey Road cover, jaywalking, Blue Jay Way. He then crashed into a lamppost. A car crash sound is heard in Revolution number 9 and A Day in the Life. He was pronounced dead on a Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins, which is from Leaving Home. And nobody found out this because the news withheld it, kind of like the Princess Diana incident. Wednesday morning papers didn't come. A funeral procession was held days later, supposedly implied by the Abbey Road funeral cover, adding fuel to the legend. And in the ending of Strawberry Fields Forever, some believe John said, I buried Paul, in a slow, deep voice, like you had just said. So, interesting stuff, man. I don't know. The only thing that really kind of drives it home for me potentially is the photos. Sometime go on there and look it up, and you've got a lot of information and photos of the supposed Billy Shear. One guy's got pointed rabbit teeth. One guy just kind of has typical not pointed rabbit teeth. Okay, so you don't have anything else for the Beatles? We're good on the Beatles?
No, we're done with the Beatles, my friend. I would like to point out that if you go onto Reddit, there is a subreddit about how to shift your consciousness into alternate realities, and one of them is called mirror or candle staring. Okay. And you light a candle. It doesn't matter what fucking color. You can light a blue candle. You can light a red candle. I would say light a white candle because white symbolizes pure energy. And you light the candle and you stare intently into your eyes. You gaze into your own reflection and you wait and you concentrate as hard as you can. And when you notice that sudden, like a slight change, like maybe there's a slight scar on your face now, or there's just a slight difference in the way you start to look, you, my friend, have shifted into an alternate reality.
Ah. So here's what you do. You get your candle, you get your mirror, you go into the other reality, you grab you a copy of a Berestain Bears book, and you bring that sucker back, and you prove, by God, that we're not all crazy.
But here's the thing, though. If I do all that, and I do the mirror thing again, right?
Or wrong.
There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that I'm going to come back into this reality.
That's true.
Because the one Reddit user said it took him like 8 times to get back into his current reality.
Oh, thank goodness he made it back, though, or else we'd never have that story.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe the alternate Preston in the Berenstein world can see color and you can't see color.
That motherfucker.
That's true.
I don't like him already.
But in an alternate dimension, he could be a father fucker.
Ooh. Ooh.
Well, okay, so let's not only give the Beatles, the focus of this episode. Let's talk about another fantastic singer-songwriter. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that in alternate dimensions, Katy Perry was also known as Kate Perry. I've never fucking heard that. She's always been called Katy Perry. But I just learned this morning that apparently, are you sitting down? I'm being serious because this thing freaking knocked me on my ass when I was listening.
Sitting down, she kissed a girl and became Kate Perry, and she liked it.
I love you sometimes. Okay, in a serious note, and this is what I meant earlier by we're not making light of this, because what happened was very sad and still remains to be a very odd, unsolved case that has never left the tabloids, okay? With that being said, there is a conspiracy out there, Preston, and everybody listening, that Katy Perry secretly is JonBenet Ramsey. Have you heard this?
No.
Is that fucking weird or what?
Yeah.
Is that not one of the most bizarre things you've heard in a very long time? I mean, forget the Beatles. That's probably not real.
That is, and because right now I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I'm trying to picture JonBenet Ramsey, like pictures of what I remember of her being on TV. So almost like a what was that little girl actress with the curly hair from the 50s, from the
Shirley Temple.
You know who I'm talking? Shirley Temple. I always remember JonBenet being dressed up like a Shirley Temple character, and then I'm trying to go from that to Katy Perry. It's just not happening.
It's bizarre. Okay, so if anybody's too young to recall JonBenet Ramsey, you can look her up. It's a really sad story. JonBenet Ramsey, she was a young girl. She was born in 1990 on August 6th, and she disappeared December 25th. In 1996, she was 6 years old. Which
was a really big deal for our generation, because that was in the headlines forever.
Yeah, I mean, and dude, honestly, let's be honest, it still is. And it's just now kind of skyrocketed back into the media kind of full tilt again. She disappeared from Boulder, Colorado on December 25th, 1996, 6 years old. She died somewhere between the 25th and 26th of December in 1996. So she disappeared on the 25th and she died somewhere either on that day or the next day. Cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation. A lengthy random note was found in the house, and her father, JonBenet Ramsey, apparently found the body in the basement of the house about 8 hours after she was reported missing. She had a broken skull from a blow to the head. She had apparently then been strangled with a garrote tied around her neck. The case generated nationwide public and media interest, in part because of the fact that her mother, Patsy Ramsey, a former beauty queen herself, had been entering JonBenet in a series of child beauty pageants. The case remains unsolved, and any public interest in as of September 2016 after... well, that just didn't sound right. The case remains unsolved, and a public interest as of 2016, even after several grand jury hearings. Boulder police suspected JonBenet's death was a cause... My God, nobody can read today. The Boulder police suspected JonBenét's death was caused accidentally, either by Patsy or JonBenét's 9-year-old brother Burke, believing the ransom note and appearance of the body were staged by the parents to cover up the death. And that's something that I just heard about today too, that they think ultimately, and guys, again, we're not claiming anything, it's just the facts that we've heard, that maybe the brother had done it accidentally and the family freaked out and tried to cover it up. I don't know. It's really bizarre, but it's bizarre, and it's very sad that it had to happen. But let's get back on track with Katy Perry, because that is one of the most bizarre things here. Props to puns. This article is called Shady Perry. Internet conspiracy theorists claim that pop star Katy Perry is actually the murdered 6-year-old, but their evidence doesn't hold up. In February 2016, an old internet conspiracy theory was revived when several media outlets picked up a YouTube video which asserts that JonBenet Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty pageant star who was killed in 1996 and whose murder remains unsolved, never actually died and instead grew up to be the pop singer Katy Perry. Now, you can jump on to YouTube and look up several of these. They're kind of long and they're a little bit, they drone on and on and on. The conspiracy theory is based on a variety of observations, but none of the claims are especially convincing. For example, one piece of evidence, quote, is that Katy Perry and JonBenet Ramsey have similar eyebrows. I don't know if anybody else knows this, but you can sculpt eyebrows to look alike. Don't believe me? Just Google eyebrow fads. I don't know.
If you don't believe him, ask his wife.
There you go. True. She can tell you all about it. Another piece of incidental information cited as evidence is that the pop singer once mentioned Ramsey during an interview. The full quote can be found in Perry's biography, but it reads like this. And this is kind of odd, but I think it's just a coincidence that allows people to really reach and try to make a connection. It says Katy Perry would often appear on stage at church, at family functions, and even for birthday meals in restaurants when she would serenade the table with the latest gospel tune. She's quoted saying, "Wherever I went, restaurants or whatever, I would get up and sing Amazing Grace." Katy later revealed to the Mail, quote, "Not that I was one of those stage kids. There was no JonBenet Ramsey inside of me waiting to burst out. I just started writing little songs about God or this boy I liked or two men in my life at the same time." So I think what she's trying to say, maybe, and this is just my idea, is that she's saying deep down inside at that time there was no stage performing child or, beauty pageant queen like JonBenet Ramsey. But it is an odd thing for her to say and then people to make this conspiracy, but they're trying to say basically that's a clue. It's unclear how the above displayed quote in which Katy Perry says that she is not JonBenet Ramsey proves that she is JonBenet Ramsey. The creator of the conspiracy video, David Johnson, has produced dozens of similar pieces, each offering up proof that one person is really another. In addition to Katy Perry as JonBenet, Johnson also claims that Donald Trump is Joe Biden, Jimi Hendrix is Lionel Richie, and Prince Charles is Sir Richard Branson. So, folks, this is what you get when I read these articles live. This is what you get. And if you stay tuned, I'll tell you the ultimate story of how Shawn should probably read things before he posts them. Steven, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Despite the video, Johnson isn't the first to subscribe to this particular theory. The idea was first floated on various internet forums after the pop singer shared a glamour shot of herself as a child from back in August 2010. She wasn't a child in 2010. She's sharing a photo of herself. And she shared the photo in August 2010. And people are saying that this glamour shot of her as a kid looks a lot like JonBenet. While most comments are more or less joking, pointing out that the young Perry's face slightly resembles JonBenet, this photo provided the seed for a new conspiracy theory. This isn't even the first time a pop singer has been accused of being an adult JonBenet. Before Katy Perry, it was Lady Gaga. That's bizarre, too. But unlike Katy Perry's conspiracy theory, which centered on the singer's eyebrows, the evidence for Lady Gaga is her ears. That's just silly. What do you think?
Not her nose.
There are many logical flaws in these theories. First, Perry was born in 1984, 6 years before JonBenet Ramsey, and Lady Gaga, Stephanie Germanotta, was born in 1986. Second, Perry's childhood is well documented, as is Lady Gaga's. Finally, the tragic case of Katy... Man, see, I think she's the same person too, because I can't get her name straight. Finally, while the tragic case of John Bonet's murder remains unsolved, that doesn't mean that she's still alive. Police discovered Ramsey's body in her family's basement on December 26, 1996. We know that. And an autopsy was supposedly performed shortly after that. So, I don't know, man. What do you think? That's...
Okay, so I'm gonna add this in here real quick, that I don't ever remember them finding the body. I remember that there was a note and all that, but I always remember Jean Bonnet as being an unsolved case. Like one of those, and maybe because it's just been so long since it's happened, but it's one of those, like, they found like a skeleton in the woods some odd years later and linked it to being her, and that's why everybody thinks it's an unsolved murder. I don't technically remember it, when they said they found the body in the basement. I don't remember any of that.
Really?
Yeah, not at all.
Oh, that's really strange too. I don't know, man. It's definitely one of the strangest unsolved murders, in our lifetime. Something else I heard on a similar note here, we should have talked about this in the news. I actually just remembered John Benet Ramsey's brother currently is threatening to sue CBS over the documentary, that CBS is trying to put on TV, or maybe they already put it on there. I think they already put it on. In the case of John Benet Ramsey, a group of investigators re-examined the case and determined that Burke, who is her brother, who was 9 at the time, probably killed his 6-year-old sister by accident in a fit of anger, and that their parents covered it up. Burke, Ramsey's lawyer, said CBS used lies, misrepresentation, distortions, and omissions with very few grains of truth to falsely accuse Burke in the documentary, which aired Sunday and Monday. Okay, so it's already been out, Sunday and Monday. The accusations of the CBS so-called experts lack substantial evidence to support and contradict the factual conclusions reached by legitimate law enforcement authorities and expert familiar with the actual evidence developed in the case. The lawyer told CNN in a statement, CBS's false and unprofessional attacks on the young man are disgusting and revolting. CBS told CNN that it stands by the broadcast and will do so in court. So I mean, that's kind of crazy too, man. Like, yeah. I haven't watched it, obviously, but it sounds like maybe they're doing one of those true crime type things, like To Make a Murderer or Making a Murderer, that kind of deal. Because I mean, those are kind of hot right now, the true crime docs. But yeah, it sounds like maybe they're just saying, guys, we solved it and we think it's the brother, and God, I hope he doesn't sue us. So that's unfortunate too. So I don't know, man. Katy Perry being John Bonet, I think it's another one of those that a lot of puzzle pieces look like they go in the right spot, but maybe they just don't quite belong.
Yeah, I'm not buying into it. So, I mean, I could buy that Jimi Hendrix, Lionel Richie more than I could Katy Perry and John Bonet.
Man, so. that's yeah. I don't know, man. Lionel Richie.
I mean, he never played guitar like Jimmy, but I think if you're wanting to lead like a double life and get out of the spotlight like Jimmy, you turn into Lionel Richie. I just want to know what happened. Like, so Jim Morrison supposedly never died and is roaming the earth as we speak as the Lizard King, and Elvis never died or got abducted by aliens and was taken far, far away. But I'm a huge Hendrix fan, so...
You mean Lionel Richie?
No.
Second man, I couldn't quite remember.
Maybe, like, Jimi Hendrix gave up being a musician and took up acting and came back on the scene in 1982 as Lando Calrissian. I'm making a stretch here, but I just don't want Jimmy to be dead.
Back to the Beatles, one of my favorite songs of all time, secretly, is Say, Say, Say by Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
I freaking love that song. Love it to pieces. Didn't the old story go that they teamed up for that, and Michael Jackson was very inspired by McCartney, and McCartney gave him a lot of, good pep talks and took him under his wing, and then told him something like, if there's something you want in life, you got to take it by the horns, don't let anybody stop you, and then... Ironically, Michael Jackson.
I think he meant take it by the balls.
Shit. But didn't Michael Jackson end up buying all the Beatles' estate?
Yes, the whole Beatles catalog and owns all the rights to all that.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Okay, cool. So now that I made fun of Michael Jackson, do you got anything else to add to this cattywampus episode?
No.
Okay.
But I'm glad you're coming off of your espresso shot high there, buddy.
I'm coming down. Okay, so I'm a pretty humble guy, and I love to dish out good ribbings to all my friends and people, and give people a lot of shit and make fun of people. But I try to be quick to be humble when I embarrass myself. It's pretty few and far between. But did I ever tell you? Did I ever tell you about the time that I read the Michael Jackson article halfway through? Thought, oh my God, this is earth-shattering news. The world has to know. And then I posted it, not realizing that it was a fake article.
No.
All right, guys. I'm sorry it's been a long episode, but just stick with this one. It might make everything else worth it.
It's going to be all edited out anyway. So.
Yeah, it's true. It's yeah. Okay, so I was on Facebook one time in the last couple years, and I saw an article. And the article, and tell me if I get robot-y so I can know exactly when to come back. Okay. Neverland Ranch investigators discover corpse of real Michael Jackson. It was an article that was put out March 16th, 2005. Here we go, guys. Buckle up. It's going to be pretty awesome. Santa Barbara, California.
Bumpy ride.
What's that?
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Down the Paranormal Highway. Santa Barbara, California. During a search for evidence at the Neverland Valley Ranch, investigators discover a corpse that has been identified as that of Michael Jackson. Santa Barbara police officials announced Tuesday. Quote, coroners have officially pronounced Michael Jackson dead. From what we can tell, he died between 18 and 20 years ago, right? So my head was like, huh? Tell me more. Forensic investigator Tim Holbrook said, we are not certain at this time who or what has been standing trial in the Santa Maria courthouse, because during that time he was in court, for the dastardly deeds. According to Holbrook, Jackson's corpse was buried just inches below a stretch of the miniature train tracks that run throughout Neverland. The largely desiccated corpse wore the remains of a red zipper-covered leather jacket and a single glove. Quote, we positively identified the body as Jackson by the dental records and DNA, Holbrook said. But even before we conducted a single forensic test, we began to suspect that we'd uncovered the real Michael Jackson and that the disturbing figure claiming to be Jackson was a fake. They said that investigators compared the bodies to early career publicity photos of Jackson. They saw a striking resemblance in the bone structure of the facial features of the old Michael Jackson before the surgeries. But when they compared the body to photos taken after 1987, the resemblance was negligible. The discovery raised a lot of questions, but it also shed light on numerous of disturbing incidents, Holbrook said. And just frankly, Jackson had been acting pretty strange recently. Forensic experts and musical critics are postulating that Michael Jackson was dead before the release of the multi-platinum record Bad. Detectives are currently analyzing the lyrics to Man in the Mirror for any clues relating to the look-alike entity that many suspect murdered the youngest member of the Jackson 5 and assumed his identity. So at this point, I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. Okay. They believe Neverland severed. Gross. We believe Neverland served as some sort of freakishly whimsical tomb constructed by Jackson's killer, Holbrook said. We also suspect that all of the inequities had occurred on that ranch were the work of the imposter. I wouldn't have ever thought it was possible, but we are looking at a situation where the sexual abuse of a 13-year-old cancer patient is the tip of the iceberg. Holbrook said that while the living Jackson is leading... Fuck if I could only read. Holbrook said that while the living Jackson could be the leading suspect in the murder investigation, there could be another victim of some sort. Basically, we have no idea what type of creature we are dealing with, Holbrook said. A member of the investigative team... Huh?
A vampire.
A vampire. Maybe. Hold on to that. A member of the investigation team that discovered Jackson's body described the experience as otherworldly. As we neared the perimeter of Neverland, the dogs started whining and howling like crazy, Santa Barbara County Detective Frank Poehler said. We had to pull them into the house. When we got to Jackson's bedroom, one of them almost choked himself to death on his leash trying to get out the window. Minutes later, the same dog led us to the corpse. So now I'm thanking Preston. The entire world needs to know this, and the only place for me to tell the entire world is Facebook without reading the rest of this article. Copy, post, next. this is where things start to go down for me. This was my downward spiral. A representative from Jackson's self-created label MJJ Productions said that he was not surprised to find out the current Jackson is an impostor. Quoted saying, "We were recording Heal the World for Dangerous, and I could tell something was terribly, terribly wrong." MJJ manager Luke Allard said, "Michael didn't seem like himself anymore. He demanded bizarre food, and he would sit for hours in a hyperbaric chamber." Now, we saw photos in the 80s of the hyperbaric chamber. Maybe that was a hoax. Some people say it was just a joke he posted. His appearance began to become more and more peculiar. Soon afterwards, he started wearing a mask and confiding in a chimpanzee. "I remember thinking, this man has become a monster," Allard said. "If only I'd known how right I was." Allard said he thinks that the imposter broke ties with Jackson's former friends and surrounded himself with children who were too young to notice the radical changes in his physical appearance. Now I'm starting to think, okay, maybe shouldn't have posted article. And then I read this. Vanity Fair reporter Beth Pyther visited Neverland in 1994. She quotes saying, "A strangely fearful staff member led me to Jackson but ran off before I opened the door." Pyther said, "Standing there with my hand on the ice-cold doorknob, I hear strange, unnatural sounds. Leathery wings flapping, a sorrowful wail, a loud hissing. A wave of dread passed through me as I opened the door, but all I found was Michael and some kids in pajamas eating ice cream and watching 101 Dalmatians. And had I been in that same room at that moment, Preston, I would have been shitting my pants thinking, my God, how do I delete a Facebook post and erase everybody's memory?" While their claims have not been corroborated, other Neverland visitors have reported that when Jackson entered the room, lights flickered, faucets ran blood red, and screams escaped from the walls. And if I didn't have any more fecal matter in me at that time, it'd be amazing. To aid the investigators, the FBI enlisted Dr. Richard Weingarten, a noted expert on the paranormal from UC Santa Barbara. After only 2 hours, Weingarten abandoned the project. He kicked rocks. He says the smell of sulfur and decaying facial features, the bizarrely high-pitched voice, it sounds exactly like ... "I'm sure it's nothing. Not a big deal, nothing to be terrified about. Certainly, I have to go. I've got a family." And he just burst out the door. Thomas Sneeden. Thomas Sneeden, the prosecutor in Jackson's child molestation lawsuit, said it remains to be seen how the shocking discovery will affect the trial. Megan Gustafsson, who left her post as president of the Akron, Ohio Michael Jackson fan club after singer was accused of molestation, offered a positive review of the grisly revelation. This is very disturbing news, but to be honest, it's kind of relief too. Thriller and Off the Wall are really amazing records. What are you doing?
Don't worry about it. Just
Thriller and Off the Wall are really amazing records. Now I can pull them out of my ruined by child abuse storage bin and start listening to them again. And then I thought to myself, why did they end this article with a little green onion? Guys, I had never before that day heard about what the Onion website was. It's just another, shit news source. At this point, I get back on Facebook and I'm ridiculed by tons of people laughing and pointing at me, and Steven being the one holding the biggest pitchfork and the brightest burning torch, laughing at me, telling me that it was a fake website for fake news and basically was just a satire website, and I was the biggest jackass on the face of the earth at that moment. Oh. It very much was, and you should probably throw that thing away. So yeah, there you have it, guys. My biggest flub thus far.
Shawn.
That's what was playing through my head when I heard that shit. So, man, I think, if somebody's made it this far in this episode, we commend thee, because it may not have been the most easy thing to remember. But that's what you get when we are left to our own devices. Again, Rob, we hope you start to feel better, buddy. Can't wait for you to get back in here and keep us in line. I say we should pull the plug here. You got anything you want to plug? See what I did there?
I'm hoping that Rob is back together, because I've been enjoying this D&D podcast we're doing a little bit more than what I should.
Right, I'd second that, yeah.
D&D. And so I'm enjoying my time with Robert when we do that. So hopefully he's back in business Wednesday. You can catch us on his Twitch stream account, and we should be D&Ding, and that's it.
That's it. Okay, cool. Guys, I would love to take an opportunity to plug a lot of stuff right now. So, podcast first. Guys, we're fortunate enough to be part of the Pixelated Sausage community. We would like to first and foremost plug Cush's podcast, Pixelated Sausage. He does a lot of talking about anime, movies, I think books, maybe books, comic books, TV shows, everything pop culture that he enjoys, he shares with the world. He is also one half, sometimes 1/3 of the Pixelated Radio podcast. That's with our buddy Corey and, of course, Rob and Rich. They discuss video games, pop culture, movies, and everything else. Oh, man, Rich, don't kill me. Rich has a podcast, I think it's called Sports Car Unleashed.
Yes, that sounds
I think
right.
I nailed it. Hopefully I did. So, yeah, catch that if you enjoy that. Our buddy Steven, it's all about friends here, guys, at the Pixelated community. Steven and Brady have a podcast that they have brought back from the ashes of the Phoenix called Oh, Indeed, another video game pop culture, probably toys and everything else cool from our childhood podcast. Oh, Indeed, spelled O-H-H-H-H. Indeed, 4 H's. Catch them. If you're into beer, check out Handy Homebrewer podcast. They've got a lot of good stuff about brewing and brewing beer. I had the extreme fortune to spend a day with Matt and also Tori from Hopping Gnome Brewery here in Wichita, and learned a lot of cool stuff from them. Again, that was Handy Homebrew podcast. They've got a lot of episodes and a lot of good stuff in there. So I think that's it, guys. Thanks.
Ooh, let's not forget the Bruds down in Texas.
The Bruds. What the fuck is the Bruds?
The Expanded Perspectives. That's a pretty decent podcast.
There you go.
So if you need a little bit more strangeness in your life, give those fellas a listen. They would appreciate it.
Hey, there you go. There you go. And I already mentioned Bizarre States earlier. Jessica Chobot, Andrew Bowser. Pretty good podcast. A lot of fun. Sometimes they go off the rails, but even then it's still a good time. So
Did Grandpa Corcor get to meet her at his little convention thing that he went to?
I think Corey did. I think Corey met her or at least saw her. And I mean, if I was there, I would have just picked her brain about all sorts of cool, like paranormal crap and said, the hell with the video game information. So, yeah. But there we go, guys. Thanks again for humoring us and sticking with it until the end. It means the world to us. We've got a little recording at the end here of how you can reach us. If you've got listener stories, hit us up, guys. We'd love to hear them. Otherwise, thanks again. You really earned it for sticking it out on this one, and we'll be back, episode 6. We're going to bring you some good stuff, guys. We got a lot of good stuff in the pipeline.
Shawn is no longer the host.
Yeah, if we can get one listener story by the next week, I will personally stomp on that noise machine Preston has and mail you the broken pieces. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you again within the next 2 weeks.
The cast at Pixelated Paranormal would like to thank you for listening to this week's episode. Pixelated Paranormal is here to tell you tales of the fantastical, the strange, the unknown. Tales that will move you a little further down the paranormal highway. If you'd like to share your own listener story, we would love to hear it. You have 2 ways. 1, email us at pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. Again, that's pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we have that set up too. Dial us at 707-523-4263. Again, that's 707-523-4263. We'd really love to hear from you. Again, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
The largely conspiracy. There's it. Yep. Google, you're embarrassing me in front of all my friends.